Hey guys, it's Josh, and welcome back to the Not So Bad Bachelor Pad, your favorite podcast for learning how to balance between being a functional adult and a raging dumpster fire. Some days it's a little heavier on the dumpster fire. Joining me today is Cain Parish. Cain, can you tell me a little bit about your story? How did you end up here today?
Absolutely. It was one of those things that was born from necessity, I guess. I grew up in a pretty independent environment. I was sort of left to my own devices a whole lot. I didn't get a lot of a chance to grow up with that consistent sort of friend base or like really solid sort of social circle or community that a lot of people have access to. And so I sort of just figured I needed to fend for myself. I wasn't really good at making friends. I wasn't good at talking to people. I was, just struggling a lot on some of those like real foundational interpersonal skills and stuff like that. So once I realized that was something I cared about, I spent a lot of time learning about how to fix it, about how to try and solve those particular issues that I was seeing for myself. And it sort of just snowballed from there. And all of a sudden, with enough practice and enough dedication and enough time, I feel comfortable enough doing those sorts of things and teaching them to other people. So now I'm a writer, I'm an educator, I'm a guest speaker, I do all sorts of stuff now. So as far as coaching and other bits and pieces are concerned, that's my shtick.
Now, one thing that I find to be really interesting about you is the fact that a lot of people, especially in this day and age, when they coach, especially, or anytime they have like a product of sort, we use the word influencer a lot. So there's a lot of quote unquote viral content that we strive for, but not you. Like you said, you started writing. Tell me, I guess that maybe shows a little bit about your past. How you were kind of, for a lack of a better word, a loner, more introspective. Do you think that's why you went the writer route, or was it just just a new tactic? I don't know.
It's one of those things where the answer is probably a little bit of both. It's closer to the medium point than anything else. Like I've always really liked writing. I like the written word. I like reading. I like consuming sort of text-based content. Like whenever I've been dedicated towards like solving a problem or finding out something, I'm usually drawn to like things like Reddit or blogs or forums or books, things that, have all of that stuff written down for me in one place. But as far as my own career path, I guess, in this subject, you could say, it was from a mental health standpoint, first and foremost. I want to take care of myself before I can take care of anybody else. I believe in that really strongly. I think you can't do a lot for another person unless you're solid and stable and happy. And I tried the influencer thing. I tried, recording video content or like pushing myself to do the traditional sort of like guru route or the gimmicky route of like, pushing everything out on TikTok or YouTube or whatever that was. Didn't make me happy. I didn't enjoy it. I got stuck a lot of the time. I hit a wall. It wasn't something I found very enjoyable. And I didn't really think I was very good at it. Like I was struggling to communicate my message a lot of the time without someone on the other end to bounce off of, which is why I like podcasts. I prefer those a lot more than just like sitting and staring at a camera, which, I mean, I know that's a skill and I know that's something you can develop, but if your soul doesn't like it, if your heart doesn't want it, then it might just not be for you. So yeah, I stick to text, I stick to writing, I stick to communicating in the way that I know how and the way that I'm comfortable with. And I think I can get my message out.
I love that. And sometimes I find myself shooting clips 3, 4, even 5 times.
Yeah.
Because, like you said, without having another person to just interact with as I record or as you try to like come up with formulate ideas, sometimes it feels a little cringe. And I was like, I don't know if this is for me either, but yet I still do it. So like I said, I think that's a huge testament to be like, A, print is not dead, contrary to a lot of beliefs. B, like it's not a gimmick, but it's something that's authentic to you, which definitely shows up more into your writing or any of your
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And look, I hope that's the case, I feel like I can do those quick cuts and change a sentence 5 different ways. And that feels nice and natural. I write how I would speak. So if I'm sitting there staring at a camera, like I feel like the voice that's coming out isn't even mine at that point,
Mm-hmm. And people can tell when you're being disingenuous or you're quote unquote pretending, when you're not your authentic self. So when you are in your actual element, you just do a way better job at connecting.
And look, I mean, it wasn't something that was easy to do, I guess. Like for those that don't know me, I've got an education platform online where I host probably, I'd say, the most comprehensive like dating and relationship advice that I've found on the internet personally. And I'm, try and keep it updated. I try and put as much content in there as possible. So there's a lot of stuff on there that's probably a little deeper than your average advice. And the way that all started was journaling, actually. I was, doing it for my own sake, for my own personal development. And I wrote, I think, probably about 150 pages of journal before I ever got to actually publish anything for another person. It was just all introspection. It was all stuff that was just about trying to sort out what was going on in here and what I was feeling and what I was thinking and what I wanted out of life. And the first pages of that journal are hideous. Like, I can't even go back and read them now. It's that cringe. Like, I can't look at it myself. I even had to put a cover letter on the Google Doc so that whenever I opened it for the first time, like on a new browser, I didn't have to go back and look at that same set of entries, because it was just that hard to read. Like, the first sentence, my eyes would just jump there and I was just like, no, I can't do that. So there was that much journaling. So there was an amount of practice that went into it, but clearly it was something I cared about enough if I was doing it when no one was looking. And now there are people looking, I guess.
That's so true. Well, guys, I was like, we didn't come just to talk about print not being dead. we did come to talk about his work on his website and his platform. I think it's super interesting because a lot of people don't think about it because we're so oversaturated with this pickup artist culture right now. The art of one-liners, or if you send this text, or, they'll fall hopelessly in love with you. I mean, it could happen. In all the years of my life, I've never seen just one line hypnotize anybody into falling in love.
It's never usually quite that simple. Yeah. Sometimes it's takes two even, it could get crazy.
Listen,
double up the output.
You sometimes you need a whole spreadsheet.
Well, let's not get crazy here. Like, that's
listen, one for every day of the week at least. I gotta keep it fresh, or you gotta space them. No, but we were talking about this a little earlier. The art of genuine connection is so powerful, and I think that's something that we are still missing in this current dating scape. From people being too timid to really take a shot at somebody they're interested in, or somebody trying to portray a character that they think people are interested in. So one of the questions I would have to ask you throughout your journey, how have you found the balance of being genuine and being able to take that first step to interacting with somebody?
That's a really interesting question, because my personal experience with it was probably not what I would recommend to a ton of people. Like, it's not, I wouldn't necessarily advise that a lot of people go down the route that I went down, because it was fraught with danger and uncomfortable situations and, a lot of mistakes and stuff like that. So, I mean, the crux of it all was that if you go back and you tell, like, say a 15, 16-year-old, they're pretty uncomfortable with themselves. They don't know what's going on around them. They're not really good at like socializing or trying to make friends or find like dates or whatever. And you go and you tell them to like, just be themselves, Like, that's a good piece of advice. It's not a bad thing to say to someone, but it also doesn't necessarily give them a lot of direction, a lot of guidance. It doesn't tell them like what's, socially acceptable, what's, comfortable for them, what makes sense, what's like what attractive components that they have that they can sort of magnify a little bit more. So I think a bit more nuance in those sort of things makes sense. And I think that once you sort of come out the other side of learning all of the fundamentals and learning how human connections work and what people like and what people don't like and what makes sense for you and what you actually want to be able to portray to the rest of the world, then you can sort of just ease into being comfortable and being yourself and stuff like that. But there's a little undercurrent of self-development that I think that needs to take place before you can sort of just like sit back and let the world kind of come to you. I think you need to tackle it a little bit first before it becomes like just so effortless and be like, oh, just do whatever. It's fine.
Yeah.
We cannot just, throw ourselves out there and expect something to work if it hasn't been working in the past.
We all kind of need a tutorial on how the world works. You need exposition. Like, there has to be some type of synopsis on like, hey, here's the world that we're in. Here's what's okay. Here's what's not acceptable. And also, somebody told me this and I kind of agree. You're right. Just being yourself is not a bad piece of advice. Is it useful? Not at all. People never really, I feel like, know who they are, or it's not something that it's something that we're always working on. Learning who you are is a continuous journey. The person that you are today is not going to be the person who wakes up tomorrow or the day after that. We always have little bits of growth. And sometimes there are hard points where we have major growth. Being you is important, but I think what's even more important is understanding who you are and understanding what you're looking for.
It's one of those things where if you say to someone, just be yourself, that's really good advice if that's an attractive, confident, assertive, like healthily vulnerable person with all of the smattering of like healthy, personality traits and like a solid life. But those people aren't necessarily looking for dating advice. They've kind of got it figured out a lot of the time. So the people that would be looking for that advice are going to be the ones that struggle a bit. They're going to be the ones that are, through no fault of their own, either too timid or too repressed or too introverted to be able to go out and actually make a life for themselves that they want. And if you tell that person, just be yourself, how does that help them? The person that they have been this whole time has been part of the reason that they're in the position they're in. They have to learn how to break out of some of those molds and push the comfort zone to a point where they can be a person that is going to be able to create a life that they're actually happy with and they're actually fulfilled. There's this weird sort of like uncanny valley dip where you get that middle point where, once you're working on yourself for a little bit, you can just, relax and ease off the gas, and it becomes a lot more comfortable and a lot more straightforward.
I could not have said that any better myself. It's an uphill battle at first. We spend a lot of times in our head, which is a super scary place. And then there's all the pressure and feedback that we get from the outside world. So once you finally make it to the top of that hill of doing that intrinsic work, journaling, doing your affirmations, whatever process has been working for you or that you're on right now, and you're at the top, you're right. You can finally see the horizon. You're like, okay, now I know what I'm shooting for. Let's just walk down the hill, get a little bit of momentum that builds confidence. You find your rhythms. I tell people, especially anybody who knows me knows that I was like, I'm a super weird person. I can admit that. But I was like, knowing that I'm weird and quirky and making that a strength instead of a weakness has always been my guiding principle. So I was like, even if you aren't stereotypically the jock or what people define as attractive, if you really start to understand yourself and can use what some people might think to be a weakness or a downfall, shortcoming, and you just lean into it hard enough, people will respect it. And who knows, it actually might turn into a major strength.
I always say that learning these sorts of like core fundamental social principles is a lot like learning to play an instrument. When you first pick up a guitar or something like that, if you just start strumming random strings and see what happens, like you're probably not going to sound very good. And that's the same way if you just run outside and start yelling at people, like no one's really going to have a good time with that. Yeah. Much less yourself. But over time, some of the most prolific musicians have been the ones that have broken the mold and found a unique way that their style or their creativity expresses themselves. And that's the same way. Like you have individual personality quirks that are going to be valuable to other people and valuable to yourself as long as you can let them come through in a fundamentally sound way. Just the same way you need to learn what a chord is. You need to learn what the key, like how to tune the guitar in the first place so that the noises it's making aren't like hideous to the human ear. So yeah, there's some boxes you got to tick, and it's an ongoing process. But at the end of the day, there is still room for unique people, and there is still room for people to be quirky or weird or introverted or silent, or whatever personality trait that you have is never going to be a negative unless it's, actively malicious or harmful or just, overall bad for people, I guess.
Right.
But 9 times out of 10, if you've got something unique about yourself, there's a way to harness it into something that's going to be great once you get some practice behind it and once you learn how to express it in a cool, positive way.
Now, we've spent a little time talking about how to embrace your authentic self and how important it is to learn how to portray that. Correct me if I'm wrong. That's only half the battle, because a lot of the times we're not really organically meeting people anymore. We're meeting people via the internet, via apps, as extroverted or as dynamic as you might feel. I think sometimes we lose a little bit of personality over text, or when we only have 300 characters to find our expression.
Yeah, being put limits on can be really hard. If you're not a text person, then it's going to be really uncomfortable for you to try and meet people by texting them. And the problem with a lot of those modern solutions is that they facilitate shortcuts. And that is very antithetical to the idea of becoming more comfortable being vulnerable or being open to rejection or like putting yourself out there. If I'm like just scrolling through Tinder, seeing what's up, I'm never going to get any practice at meeting people in real life or developing connections in a way. And if the more I become reliant on those technological solutions, the harder it becomes for me to dig myself out of the hole. So yeah, it's a pretty tricky balance to navigate, is trying to be authentic and portray yourself in a cool way through an app that is explicitly designed to intentionally shut down a lot of those more nuanced and quirky components of people. You know? Like, it's no secret that just traditionally attractive people will do the best on dating apps, and that there are biases towards certain features or certain prominent like parts of a human that, you know, people with an, you know, disability or some sort of external like flaw are just going to do worse on platforms that are entirely transactional and all about appearance. That's just unfortunately the reality of how the world works. You know, there's no room for the strength of personality in these situations, which is going to be how most people will stand out.
I believe that's also how we entered the era of, you know, catfishing. Is people wanted to try to find a way to equalize the playing field, to be like, hey, if I was as attractive as person A and B, plus I had the banter, the personality that, you know, the not so demanding or in demand person would have, like, how would you fare? That's, sorry to jump, but that's, I feel like it's almost like a Love is Blind situation. Is, you know, you can't see a person really. I mean, yeah, you might have some pictures, but you don't know how recent, how old they are, how edited they are. So I was like, you're really just trying to connect via chat, via personality. I never know if that's really easier or harder. As much as we love to say it's all about personality, personality is only a portion of what maintains a relationship. So this is a question that I would love to ask you is, do you think it's a little easier dating in person, or, you know, doing the modern swipage kind of dating?
Strictly easier, probably just through apps. You know, like there is something to be said for how just straight up convenient it is to sit on the toilet, in your bed, at home, just on the couch, just like swiping through a bunch of people and talking to people. And I did have a long history with dating apps. I have very strong feelings about them, both positively and negatively. They've been a big part of my life and my sort of development in this field. And, you know, that part of that was success. You know, I met a lot of really interesting people and I had a lot of cool experiences. And that was, you know, a fundamentally positive thing for me. But they also did some damage, man. Like they get under your skin. And the way that those algorithms are designed is not to be a positive influence on you, especially if you're, you know, only having a moderate amount of success. Like the second that you start to compare to any of your female friends and be like, hey, what's your Tinder account like? Like you're in for a world of hurt. That is not a fun experience to have for the first time.
I've made that mistake maybe like two times. And I was like, I'll distinctly remember this. I was like, let me just see how many like messages you have like right now to one of my friends. She was like, I don't know. I think it's something like 52, 56. I was like, 52? I was like, dude, I'm lucky if I get a fraction of that.
Right. Yeah. It doesn't work that way.
Over the course of an exponentially longer window. But you're right. I was like, and then you're thinking like, well, yeah, like, why am I not doing as well as she is? You know, I was like, there's so many variables, but the simplest one is women they just do better. I was like, let's be honest. I was like, it's funny. There's not really a rush on them. You know, I was like, they don't really feel the pressure, I guess, that some of the guys do, is because I don't find too many selective guys when they're on the app.
They don't have the luxury to be selective a lot of the time.
And they're like, it's a numbers game. They're like, I have to keep swiping, you know, so that hopefully I can get in somewhere, do a little bit of razzle dazzle, and get a date. And I feel like you also can't be your best self when every single moment, every single message, every single profile is a buzzer beater. You know, there's 1 second left on the clock. You have to drain it. That, you know, that puts way too much pressure on you. And then there's no way that you can potentially live up to that 1 second left mentality. Plus it gets exhausting.
It's also a really bad experience for the woman on the other end too, right? Like they're not coming out with a good outcome that they wanted from that situation either. It's just a bunch of people like churning and burning through as much as possible because they've had experiences that have been so fundamentally transactional or negative up to that point. And I think that's the issue, is like I said, dating apps unquestionably easier than trying to meet people in real life. But is it better? No. Is it like better for you? Absolutely not. Like, does it create a better outcome? Not even slightly. I think that you can do them as a convenience and they can make a really good supplement if you're already locked in on every other part of your life. Yeah, no, guys are not going to have a favorable time on there, and it's only gotten worse. Like I think I probably started on dating apps, I want to say like between 8 and 10 years ago, give or take. And back then it was slightly competitive. Like you could, as an average dude, just make a profile and actually meet people. Like that was a thing that could happen, you know.
Mhm.
I would make a new account, I would get like 40 odd matches in the span of a day, which was unthinkable by modern standards, obviously. And I was pretty content with that. You know, I was meeting a lot of people, like a lot of people were actually responding. There was a lot of back and forth because we hadn't burnt ourselves out on it yet. You know, it was still a pretty fresh concept, and the algorithm hadn't settled into like putting the stranglehold on guys yet, and women hadn't gotten sick of the whole thing. So it was just really quite straightforward to actually like have some real connections and conversations on there. And then over time, I would notice that like, you know, I'd go from, you know, a few matches a week to maybe like one or two, and then, you know, one every fortnight, and I'd make a new account and I'd maybe only get like 10 to 15. And I'm like, I can, you know, I'm seeing the writing on the wall here. This is getting a lot worse by the day, and it's making me feel a lot worse by the day, because it's like, well, you know, am I the problem? Am I responsible for the outcomes that I'm having here? The answer is no, you're not. It's the machines, it's the functions that they use to keep people sort of hooked into these ecosystems. But yeah, there is still that voice in the back of your head that goes like, hey, maybe if I looked a little bit better, if I had a little more muscle, if I was a little bit taller, maybe I'd be getting better results. Maybe I'd be doing better. Maybe I'd meet someone that I'm, you know, actually connecting with. Maybe this would solve all my problems. And that's the exact mindset that these apps are trying to foster. And that's why, yeah, like I said, not good for you.
I was reading the other day and I found this out. Some of the algorithms, the way they generate who they think that you're most compatible with, or who they're placing in front of you, is like somebody who's supposed to be like right, like a league right above you, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So that's also like could be a huge ego hit. You're like, well, I'm not really finding people who I think I'm compatible with, or I'm not getting matches. And then to find out these people are supposed to be quote unquote more attractive or more desirable than I am. Like, it doesn't matter how
It's a punch to
confident
the
you are.
gut, you know?
You know, sometimes like you can still be shooken.
Yeah. Well, look, I don't know how technical you want to get with it, but yeah, there are 100 different micro optimization that these platforms make. Like if we're taking Tinder as our sort of de facto choice here, most people know about like the Tinder Elo that everyone has at this point, like how they've got like a individual ranking that sort of sorts you into like a perceived level of attractiveness by who interacts with you on the platform. Like if you get right swiped more than you get left swiped, then you're obviously going to, you know, go up, but that's not the reality for most people. See, the reason we used to make fresh accounts back in the day was that you got a newbie boost. They had like a introductory sort of compelling function of the platform where like they wanted to hook a new user in. So they would show them at the top of the stack, predominantly like way more than just your average guy that's been on there for 6 months, right? And so you'd burn through all of those and you'd get that like new boost out of the way. And then you'd actually settle into where the platform thought you were supposed to be. And the, you know, people that you were matching with they went from like the, you know, pristine sort of like people that were considered, you know, top shelf by the app to just average people like you. And it became this weird thing of everything just dropping off a cliff. And that has these psychological effects that keep on kicking. And yeah, stuff like what you're talking about, where they will intentionally show you, again, like maybe 10%, like I hate referring to it in this way because it is so transactional, but like 10% more attractive, you know what I mean? Like it's an icky term, but
yeah,
kind of just is how the platform sort of sees people as functions of their attractiveness, right? But they put those sort of people in your stack, knowing that human beings are fundamentally really bad at rating their own attractiveness and their own like perceived level of appreciation from other people. Most people will put themselves maybe like 1 or 2 points higher on a scale than like other people will sort of think that they are, which is just kind of how the human mind works and how we perceive ourselves, which is fine. But it means that if you're getting matched with people that the app also thinks are like slightly more appreciated, I guess is probably the nicest way to put it, you're going to assume that those are your appropriate match, because you will, you know, see them and see yourself and think like, oh, this is appropriate, this is what I deserve out in the marketplace or what have you. And then you won't match with any of them because you might not, probably, to be honest, you'll never even show up in their stack. Like you're that far down a pile of people, because, you know, hundreds of thousands of people in a city are going to have Tinder. And then, you know, if you try and sort through all of them one by one, like that's almost impossible at this point. Yeah, you'll probably never show up in their stack. You'll never match with any of the people you right swiped on. And then obviously those are some pretty crappy conclusions you get led towards, in that somehow this is your responsibility or your fault, or that you're not attractive enough or you're not good enough as a person, which really, if you think about it, from just a gallery slideshow of people on a phone is an incredibly like far-fetched conclusion to draw. But That's how these apps worm your way in, you know? And then you start to think about relationships like that. Is it like, is really all of my value tied up in how I'm able to present myself
Yeah.
on apps and social media? Is it possible that if I can't take a good enough selfie, that I'm not worth as much as a human? Like those are the questions that people that get into these rabbit holes start to ask themselves. And it's not productive and it's not nice.
It really is a rabbit hole to speak, once you start to spiral like that. It is tough, like you said, some of the terms that like we have to use, even though they aren't the most complimentary, it really sucks. And then it creates the cycle because swipe culture not only made us disengage from interacting with people, actually being able to hold conversations longer than 30 seconds or of any actual substance that would make me think, you know what, I think I can spend time with this person. I can connect. I can see a future with this person. It also plays to when we start interacting in the real world, because if we are so used to being like, hey, I'm not getting matches from these people, when you see somebody you think is like gorgeous or really out of your league in person, you're already conditioned to be like, they're gonna left swipe on me. They're not gonna really want to even engage in conversation with me. What do I have to offer? So when you come in starting at this negative mindset, I was like, it really takes a lot to chip away to work your way back up to zero to be like, you're just a normal person and let's just have dialogue. Who knows? Because realistically, you guys might be the best match, but because some algorithm, affected you earlier in the day or in the week, you've missed an opportunity to potentially capitalize on a person who you were interested in.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that is one of the hardest things to do, is to break back out of that cycle of seeing all of your potential relationships or connections as so binary and transactional, whether it's either a left swipe or a right swipe. Like there's no room for a gray area there. There's no room for nuance. There's no room for, maybe we'll build up a connection over time and maybe we can, see where this goes and develop feelings for each other later down the line. No, it's right then, immediate, now or never. And based on the quality of people that you're seeing in your stack and the people who are swiping on you, you start to sort of unconsciously place yourself. And so, like you said, if you see someone out in public who normally you don't think would swipe on you, you're going to assume that that person has no interest in you and would never want to talk to you, which is patently false. I can tell you that from experience. There are people way out of my league that I had no business being with, that just because of force of personality or it being, the right time of day or just sheer happenstance and luck, I ended up having a really nice connection with and developing something meaningful that probably would not have existed had I not been shooting for that in person instead of over an app.
It's such a sad state that we're in right now, but that's why we're here, is to get people to break these mindsets, to break these habits. I'm not saying that you have to leave the swipe culture alone, but one of the biggest things that I want everybody listening to really realize is don't let it define you. Because once you start digging yourself or putting yourself into the box that the algorithm, the computer sees you in, you're just setting yourself up for failure. Okay. We're always shooting towards the stars. Use the app. Don't let the app use you, because they're not really designed to be deleted. Contrary to what we believe, I was like, they're designed to keep you wanting to come back, to get that fix. We've talked about this time and time again throughout the series and with countless people, is no business is set up to be like, hey, just use me for a week and then be done. It's not really a sustainable model.
Yeah. I think to that point, if you do find yourself in a position where you're a little bit too dependent on these apps or a little bit too stuck in that mental place of thinking that these apps have more influence over your life than you do, like it's 100% not your fault. Like these companies are multi-million, possibly billion-dollar companies. I'm actually not sure what their market cap's at, but they have a lot of money and a lot of manpower and a lot of time behind figuring out the best way to get inside your head and to affect you in such a way that you're going to become dependent on what they have to offer you, usually in exchange for your money. That is their entire goal, is to create some sort of psychological state where you feel like the only way out for you is to put your credit card in and swipe, essentially.
Once again, hitting the nail right on the head. And this is something that I started to realize, as every once in a while I'll go on and I'll check out the apps just to see how much has changed. It's still the same environment that I remember. And I used the term earlier, pay to play, and we were just talking about that. And that's
Mm.
really what they're making the dating world try to become, is if you're not spending enough money to get super likes or the boost so you're seen in front of exponentially more people, you're stuck in this low level pool.
Mm.
That in itself cuts you off from so many other potential matches that you could be having. Like you said, there are too many people to really sort through one by one. But, if you're paying for it and you're always keeping yourself in the forefront, you know, and then you're just getting the matches, that just reinforces the idea that, hey, I am a quality person. You know, you have to think about those things too when you're in the swipe culture.
Mm.
Also, like I said, if you are finding yourself fatigued out, like you're burnt out, you have your self-esteem is taking too major of a hit, it's also okay to take a break from the apps. I delete it for a week, delete it for a month, however long you need. Take some time and just go back, work on ourselves. And then if you haven't met anybody or you realize, maybe I don't need to date right now and you want to get back into it, then that's fine. I was like, we all have the same issue with Twitter and Instagram. So I was like, it's not something that's exclusive to dating apps. It's just the digital world we're in now.
That's the state. And yeah, I look, it's a lot easier to see when I've been around these apps for such a long time. We went from you could just sign up and put your email in and meet dozens of people. And then it went to, you've got to have a subscription. And I didn't really mind that as much. Like if you're, paying to play at a certain level, like it's, same as having a Netflix subscription. You just got
Right.
that's cost of doing business, right? And then, a couple months, couple years down the track, it starts to be like, if I don't have boosts, no one's ever going to see me. So it's not enough that I'm just paying for a
Yeah.
subscription now. It's that I'm not paying for these boosts and these additional features, and it all ramps up real quick. You get pretty dependent pretty easily, and it's not a good place to be.
It's okay to take a break from the online culture for a while. It cannot be the only way that you see to define yourself. At least that's what I believe, and that's what I share with my clients.
I could not agree more. It's one of those things where I believe in finding a way to at the very least replace it. Like I personally haven't used dating apps for, I think we're going on about 3 years, give or take. Because yeah, there was a certain point where I just found the economical side of things just too untenable. They were asking me for too much money just to even get a shot at seeing anybody anymore.
Right.
And just the culture was something I didn't really want to be a part of. It wasn't good for me. But I would have probably struggled had I not had a method or at least like a place to meet people or a community or something like that to try and find a way to indulge in social experiences that weren't based on app culture. Like if I'd had to go from sitting in my bedroom alone with Tinder to sitting in my bedroom alone, period, that probably wouldn't have been a great transition. So I would always encourage trying to get a replacement or trying to find a, new hobby, a new social indulgence, whatever that might be, as a way to sort of ease yourself out of that and just see that the real world is not like apps and that they do not represent the way that people talk or think or feel or look at other humans. Going to like a simple recreational class or even just hitting up a bar every once in a while. People aren't actually like that. They're not as transactional. They're not as binary and just aggressive, I guess, as the apps would make you believe they are.
This is something that I started using. So I moved about 2 years ago now to a new city where I didn't know anybody. But as a person where I was looking for connection, I came across this site called Nudge, and they help you find a lot of community events that might be towards your liking. And really, that was the great first step for me to stop being on the apps as much. And I would go to some of the art shows or the free concerts. I was like getting out there and finding things that I actually have an interest in and then interacting with those people. The connections, the wealth of connection was just so much better. Once again, I didn't have to play for this. You know,
Mm-hmm.
that's the thing, because when you invest so much money, you think that you are owed such a return. They're like, well, I spent X amount of dollars, so I should get like at least 15 matches, and that should then generate so many dates. And I was like, no, just being out, being around people should be the reward, or it is for me. And then anything else is extra because you never know what interaction can change the rest of your life.
And that is a really healthy way of looking at it. And I would encourage a lot of people to try and get to that end point. But I think if anybody is stuck in that middle ground where they don't have a comfortable social circle, or they're not confident enough to go out to free events and do things like that. Everything social builds on foundations. You know, if you feel like you have something to offer people, then you're going to be able to take more steps to go out and like face people and do things. If you don't think you have something to offer people, then I would encourage you to work on yourself until you feel like there's something about you that you can be confident in, that you can have as a personality trait and display to other people and feel good about. And that way you start to build up like, you know, a couple of friends here and there, just like through happenstance, and see if you can, you know, get a little network going, have people to go have a drink with, have people to go outside with, play sports with, whatever it is that you like to do. If you can build up even just like one or two people that share in those interests and are willing to like act as your support system and your base, it makes it really easy to transition out into the rest of the world and try new things and experiment on stuff, because you've always got something to fall back to.
Now, we spent a lot of time talking about just the world of dating. There's something that I feel like we really need to delve into in order to make everything we've talked about applicable. And that's, what are the core values that you think are crucial in developing and maintaining a relationship?
Are we talking about just a relationship period, or romantic relationships, platonic? Like, how do you want to narrow that down?
I would just say period, because I think all relationships are connected and they kind of domino into each other. So I think there are just some generics that translate.
I tend to agree with you. I think a lot of those things sort of interlink. I think if you're, say you had, you know, gun to your head and you could only develop like 3 different skills that you would take into every relationship you had going forward, I would say that my top 3 would probably be self-reflection and like genuine, honest sort of internal understandings of what's going on, why you're feeling the way that you're feeling, why other people have an impact on you that they might have. Something that you can use as like a feedback mechanism to take away from certain circumstances and be like, hey, that went really well. This is why. Hey, that went really bad. This is why. And you can use that to improve on and try and figure out where your shortcomings are, and use that as an iterative mechanism to make your life better. Second one, bog standard communication, obviously. But from a perspective of really understanding why we would want to communicate with someone. Like when I say something to someone, when I write a text, when I do really anything that involves me putting something from my head out into the world, it is usually for a purpose. You know, like we have a reason that we talk a lot of the time, or we have a reason that we write text. It is for an intended outcome. That might just be to share with someone, that might be to make their day better, that might be to inspire something in them, but it's usually with a purpose. And if we can understand what that purpose is, we can get a lot better at achieving that ideal outcome through the mechanisms that we choose. You know, like I pick my words to inspire or to have an effect or to change someone's feelings or thoughts, because that's where I know I'm going with this. You know, like that's the intended outcome I'm looking towards. And then the third one would probably be humor. I think humor is almost generally applicable to pretty much everything. Like in a workplace, you can bond with people over just like some, you know, quips about like dad jokes or just like harmless little banter. If you're on a date or something, you can transition that into flirting or teasing or any of the number of ways that you can create attraction through just showing that you have like a quick wit and a funny mindset. If you're, you know, out with your friends, like half of what most people do to bond with their platonic friends is just laugh or talk about interesting things or find humor in situations. So I would say that that's probably the most generally applicable skill that will just make your social life better if you get better at it.
I like that little triad of traits. Those are pretty important, like you said, in any and every relationship that you will have. And it reminded me of a quote that somebody shared with me the other day, is the amount that any person is able to grow is directly proportionate to the amount of truth that they are able to handle about themselves. And
I would
so
agree with that.
when you start to actually have that honest dialogue with yourself about, hey, here's some things I need to work on, or why do certain things make me uncomfortable? What do I feel like? If you feel something needs to change, why does it need to change? When you can start to have those conversations with yourself, and then you actively start to make changes, becoming the person that you want to present, and then you start presenting as such, it's just this domino effect. Like you said, it just helps you build confidence. Once you are confident in the person you're portraying, more people will resonate with you, or you will light up, so to speak, and it's like a switch. And people will be like, where has this person been at? Are they new? No, you could have been around forever, but you just weren't resonating with the right people, you know? So once you start to enter into that space, you really do gain a whole new perspective, and it opens you up to a whole lot of opportunities, I feel like. And like I said, whether that's in the workplace, whether that's with a romantic partner, hopefully it's not with your family. You've logged in enough hours where they know who you are and they love and accept you. But, like I said, sometimes it just takes a little bit of a wake-up call to really get you set in your place.
Yeah, I think having a way to improve and a way to decide what needs to change for you to have better outcomes for yourself is one of the biggest cheat codes. And it starts with being able to have that conversation with yourself about what is going wrong in your life from like an external standpoint. Like, are your relationships not fulfilling you? Do you think that your friends are not particularly good people, or that you're not, actually happy with those platonic relationships? And then once you figure out why and what steps you need to be able to do in order to fix that scenario, you can push forward into a much better place a lot quicker. And then the level above that is then being able to have those conversations with other people, going like, hey, what you said made me feel like this. And so we need to find a way to address that so that that might not happen anymore. And that's a boundary that I'm putting out into the world.
Yeah.
But it starts with being able to have those conversations with yourself. If you can't enforce boundaries on your own way of thinking, you're never going to be able to do it with other people.
Boundaries is such a big word that a lot of people are using nowadays. And we've scratched the surface of it a few times. We're not going to go too deep into it today, but the main thing that I really wish people would realize when talking about boundaries is boundaries isn't just creating like a fence or a set of rules that you won't tolerate for somebody else. Boundaries are also the limitations that we put on ourselves. When people really start to think about what boundaries they're excising, I think we'll start to have a lot more people ready to have more quality conversation.
There's that classic misunderstanding of boundaries that's getting a lot more common these days. Like the fun example that I refer back to a lot is I was watching like a podcast with like a YouTube creator that I had a bit of a phase with, and he was talking to a friend of his about how he would feel if his girlfriend decided to go out to a nightclub without him. And he said that, he's in all of his past relationships, he's just put his foot down and been like, hey, that's a boundary for me. If you do that, like, cool, like I'm not gonna, stop you, but we're not gonna be together. That's a boundary that I'm creating. And a lot of people take that to heart, and they think that that means that if they just say, hey, like, this is a boundary for me, that's just off limits. And then their partner will never, like, that idea is just never going to come up again. And then the other side of that argument is like, hey, is that controlling? Is that manipulative? Is that putting undue influence on someone to not be the sort of person they want to be or do the things that they want to do? I think that that's where a lot of those misunderstandings of boundaries come from people assuming that that's just a one and done. Like, if I say that, that's the way that it is,
Mm-hmm.
Boundaries are an offer. You're putting something out and you're saying like, hey, this is a line. There's nothing stopping you from crossing it. Just know that if you do, like, that's going to make me feel bad. There are going to be consequences for that in our relationship. And you get to make that choice now. You get to go like, hey, do I value this thing more than I do the emotional consequences of how it might damage my relationship? That's a conversation you need to have. There are some boundaries that some people are just going to be willing to cross because it means more to them than the safety of their relationship or the integrity of their relationship. And that's a very personal decision, very individual thing to weigh up. But yeah, just because you set a boundary doesn't mean it's going to be followed. And you have to have a plan for what to do if it is followed and what to do if it isn't followed.
And like you said, it's not the end all be all. It's just a starting point for conversation and dialogue. One thing that I started really early, for you guys who've been with me since season 1, the early episodes, is I like to deprogram the word relationship. So often we think of it just in the romantic sense, but as we've already gone over today, relationships appear every day in so many different formats. Like you said, we have the relationships with family members, coworkers, the people we are interested in, and we have a super, super important relationship, and that's with ourselves. Because until we get that relationship in check, nothing else is really going to thrive. That's where we have to start. It's the start and end point for any longevity. If we aren't respecting ourselves, if we aren't taking care of ourselves, then we're going to allow promotions or opportunities to pass us at work. We're going to allow ourselves to be underpaid and overworked. If we're going to allow somebody to treat us in a relationship like we're the lucky ones, like we don't deserve to be there. We really have to take the time and work on self first and foremost to maintain any relationship. That's one of my core values, is start with self. Because with if this is the first level, if this is the gateway, if we can't clear this first mission of, like I said, just getting to know who we are and showing up, I don't know how we're gonna to go anywhere else. We don't have any other skills to build off of.
Yeah, that's the foundation. And there's nothing better than knowing that you're further along some sort of journey than where you started, and that has made a tangible difference, you know? Like for all my gym bros out there, if you go and pack on an extra like 5 kilos of muscle, you get to look in the mirror every day when you wake up and say, like, hey, that's a gift that I gave to myself in the past. That has just made me something that I wasn't. And I get to look at that every day and be happy and be satisfied that that's something that I accomplished. And social skills are the exact same, you know?
Well, you just saying that spurred me into starting the segment. I think it's time for my favorite segment, and that's our quickie questions. The first question I have to ask is, where are you from? Because the fact that I know that you aren't in the States, because you just use the term kilo,
Yeah.
that is definitely not something that we use very often around here. So where are you at right now?
I'm in Adelaide in Australia. It is down in the south of Australia. We are the largest country town in the country. Technically a capital city, but it's small enough. There's enough people here that all know each other. Sometimes it just feels like one of those big rural towns out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah. Australia loves the pod. A lot of support from Melbourne. You know, I don't know where we would be without them.
Yeah, that's pretty much most of Australia is like we're all just sort of feeding our way into Melbourne essentially. Like, you know, all just trying to be Melbourne really, really bad, but not quite getting there.
Like that's even a bigger shout out for making it today. Because I know we have a massive time difference between us. I think it's like 13, 15 hours.
Yeah, look, I'm not actually sure what time it is for you right now, but it's pretty much midday for me. This is about as cozy as it was going to get. So I'm pretty happy.
So right now, it's like 9 p.m.
That's not even that bad. I've had a lot worse. Like I woke up at 3:30 for a pre-interview with someone in Los Angeles, and that was slightly less fun. Trying to be agreeable and personable at 3:30 in the morning is a challenge at the best of times.
No, I've been there. I'll never forget. I think it was episode 18 we did with my first guest from Australia. That was a tough one because I used to work. I still work in the bar industry, so I got off at like 2 a.m. I took a 2 hour nap, and then it was like 9 a.m. And like I'll show you times that, but it was like 4 a.m. here, and I was like, all right, let's crack open a couple Red Bulls and
Yeah.
let's make some.
Look, I just got out of the bar life myself, so that makes perfect sense. I could totally see that.
Yeah, time zones are not your friend, guys. Like
No.
they can either make for the best content or the worst content, depending how far away it is. I don't know, but the next question I have is we've been talking a lot about relationships, and the theme of the show is relationship based. So I kind of have to ask, currently, are you partnered, unpartnered?
What's the deal kind of thing? Yeah, fair. At the moment, I am pretty happily poly. So I started exploring non-monogamy, I want to say like 5, 6, 7 years ago now. And it was something that was always like off and on in my life and something I sort of indulged in occasionally. Just depends on what you find a good fit for you and your partner. Like I believe very firmly in relationship anarchy, if you've ever run into the concept. Yeah, so I just whenever I like find someone that I connect with on any particular level, we pick and choose our boundaries and what makes sense for us. And right now that's poly. So I'm pretty happily with a particular partner and enjoying, the other parts of my life and some less serious relationships and just seeing where things go.
Congratulations on finding a partner who is willing to journey with you. Having a primary just support you is huge, and allowing you to live your life and explore and just kind of do your day to day as you need to is amazing.
Yeah, I'm really grateful for her.
Yeah. And next question. This is a bit of a fun one for me because I think as a coach, I like to say our whole job is to make people better or to get them to leave those bad habits alone. But I was like, there are just some things we can't give up. So, what is a quote unquote toxic trait that you know isn't great for you, but you are still attracted to?
Oh, yeah. Good old fashioned vices. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, I just got out of the bar industry myself. I worked at a little dive bar on our main sort of like nightlife strip for about 3 years. And that was really, really fun, really enjoyable, just something doing like on the side just to, let loose a little bit. And I think I'm just really attracted to a lot of that very chaotic lifestyle, like where, you finish up at 3 a.m., you knock back a few shots, and then you talk about stuff you shouldn't be talking about, and you go and just get a little bit loose and wild, and that's just fun for everybody. So yeah, if I had a toxic trait that was cutting back into my life in probably a more of a negative way than I might have liked, it would be something to do with, enjoying my nightlife a little bit too much.
I wish I could say I don't know what you're talking about, but I definitely have been there a time or 12,
Yeah.
I might have been there last night. I will not deny. What is something that you've always wanted to do that you just haven't had a chance to start?
I think the travel box, like I've never had like a ton of wanderlust or real, enthusiasm for going different places and seeing different stuff, but it is painfully aware to me that, I'm on a big floating rock in the middle of nowhere, and there's quite a lot of other stuff outside that probably deserves to be explored a little bit, and some cultures to see and some people to visit. And, once I get everything sort of settled within my life and stuff like that, I would love the opportunity to go around and tour the globe, see what's up.
Traveling is such an interesting topic because depending on the size of your country or state, some people may not think you're like well versed in travel, but I was like, when you live on a big piece of land, like you could spend your whole life probably going all the way around it and meeting new people and like so many new cultures. I grew up in Ohio and I have family in Florida. So even though it's the same country, just going to the opposite end of it, it's like a whole new world. I was like, have I left the country? Did I bring my passport? Like, I'm pretty sure like Australia's massive too. So I'm pretty sure there's a lot of places, even just, I guess, domestically for you guys that you could explore and give you a little bit of that new perspective, new feeling.
We're pretty lucky here. It's I think one of the most multicultural places just in the world. Like we have this massive melting pot of people coming from all over to share their cultural and their values with just the wider community. But yeah, no, domestically, like I'm a 9-hour drive away from Melbourne, give or take, depending on how much I fancy stopping, which to what I understand in the US is like not that crazy of a concept. But
I was like, we'll do that one
yeah.
day, yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Based in like a capital city in Australia, you would not even like that's unthinkable. I can get from one end of my town to the other in the matter of like an hour tops.
Yeah.
So for me to go to another state and like make that whole like journey, that's a whole thing. I got to plan ahead for that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
It's the whole ordeal.
Australia is such an interesting place to me because no matter how many times I look at a map, the interior structure just it baffles me. At least like in the States, we have clear state boundaries. In the UK, like you can get from like one country to a couple countries, relatively quickly. And they're like, definitive markers. I feel like Australia just kind of like slowly like melds into like like one spot. And I'm just like they have states, but do they though? I don't know. It's just I don't know. Something about it, it's just it just puzzles me.
I'm not going to say it's well structured. Like geographically speaking, if you took the entirety of our land mass and like compared it to North America or something like that, we're not small by any means. We've got a lot of real estate. It's just that 90% of it is just blatantly unusable. It's like a massive, torrid, hot, like rock desert in the middle of nowhere with no access to nothing. So we all just migrated to the coast, and now we've got like maybe 2% of the people that any other like significant body of land does. And they're all just sort of in these little hot spots around the edge, and we just kind of keep to ourselves, and that's it.
This has become a geography lesson for me. Last question I'm going to ask about Australia for the time being. How many states do you guys have?
I actually don't even know the answer to that question off the top of my head. It's like I can name most of the relevant cities, and they would all have their corresponding state to them, but I don't think about it in terms of like we've got stars on a flag or something like that. So I think it's somewhere between like 7 and 10 if I'm guessing. And that's really embarrassing that it's going out into the public domain now that I have no earthly idea. But yeah, no, there's a couple, some.
Right. I think that's a good place to leave the geography lesson for the day.
Well, clearly I'm not qualified to be teaching it.
Listen, I learned more than before we started this conversation, so you did teach me something.
That's all I'm good for.
This is the second to last question, but it's still a two-parter. Best and worst first date. I need to hear the story.
Best and worst first date. Do you want the funny stuff or just like genuinely what impacted me the most? Because I've got some decent stories, but they're not the same as like what I would actually consider to be the most meaningful to me, I guess.
Okay. Okay, let me flip the question. I'm gonna do funniest first date and then the most impactful first date that you had. Okay.
Let's go the funniest one. I reckon it was a Tinder match that I came up with probably like, I want to say 4 or 5 years ago. And we were just sort of, we didn't have like a massively great connection over the app or anything like that. It was kind of just like, oh, we've got a, Friday night free. Let's just like see what happens. And when you go and you show up to a date and you just immediately understand the vibe like straight away.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was in for. Like I got the impression of this woman almost instantly after like she presented herself, and I was like, oh, this is just going to be crazy. Like there is no,
Yeah.
I have no idea what's going to happen here, but I can tell that none of it's going to make any sense to me whatsoever. And it's just I've never met a person that was so like clearly distinctly different from my life experience. Like we had nothing in common and we had no similar interests, and all of the stuff that I was good at she wasn't good at, and all of the stuff that she wasn't good at was just basic life skills apparently. Like we went to go get a drink and play pool, right? Very basic activity. Most people have like held a cue before. She gets it and she goes overhand with it and starts trying to spear fish like it's a javelin or something, and like just starts stabbing at the table. And I had to like run around the side of it and just grab her and be like, no, please, I swear, do not damage the felt like this. Do not, like, this is not correct technique. Like we have so many options and that was the one you picked. And I'm deeply alarmed by that.
Like, even if you've never played before, I feel like you've seen a picture and or video
That's what was so
of
funny to me, was
pool.
that it just seemed like she'd stepped straight out of this time capsule where like all of these fundamental components of just like living as a human had completely escaped her. Like she asked for like the bartender and she was like, "Hey, I want like a like vodka and I want something like fizzy, but probably not with that much taste or anything in it." And the bartender looks at her and he's like, "Do you want like a vodka soda?" And she's like, "Oh, that's a really good like is that a drink? Do people get that? Like, I feel like I've just invented something new there. That's so cool. Like, yeah, I'll totally try that." And she like gets a sip of it and pretends it's this like whole revolutionary thing. And it was this whole like, and I just sit there and I'm just looking at her like, yeah, that's crazy. Like, I can't believe you've figured out something new there. That's so creative of you to combine these two liquids that would never have otherwise touched.
I would have need to. I was like, hey, can I see your ID really quickly? Like what
Yeah,
you
look, if she
bought?
there were a lot of red flags, but thankfully I was pretty confident she was of legal age.
Jeez, no, not
Yeah.
knowing the vodka soda was the thing. That's, I think
Yeah.
I'm gonna be rolling off that one for a while.
It's good stuff. So yeah, that was probably one of the funnier ones I've had. It more of like a hat you had to be there kind of way, but it was
Yeah,
just baffling that a person like that could even exist. You know what I mean?
I want to say no, but as a bartender, I was like, nope, I can see that
Hey,
the
we've seen
amount,
some shit. I'm quite
yeah,
convinced.
the amount of wait, you can do that? Yes, it's actually been
It
done
is
for
legal.
120 years. It's a
I'm
tried
shocked
and
at
true
this.
standard. Yeah. So, what's kind of been one of the most impactful or meaningful first dates you've been on?
So that was probably an easier question to answer because it was a little bit more unconventional, so it stuck out a little bit more. It was again another Tinder date, back from, yeah, I think I want to say like 4 or 5 years ago now, give or take. And at that time, I was very aggressively straight, just pretty comfortable being,
Mhm.
a dude into girls. That was my life, no worries. And I matched with this girl, and everything was going fine. No red flags, no issues what to speak of whatsoever. We made plans to go out for a drink, and I was like, cool, that works. And I show up at this bar, and it's an outside sort of rooftop bar, and it's all very dimly lit and stuff. So, and I get there first, so I'm just kind of hanging out in the
Okay.
corner and just sort of shooting the shit with the people around me and stuff like that, and just sipping on my drink and no worries. And my date shows up, and she looks really good. She's well presented and put together really well, and everything was really nice. And I go in for a hug, and again in the lighting and stuff, I can't make out any prominent features or anything like that. But after about 5-10 minutes, it becomes clear to me that this person is trans, and they've transitioned from a male into a female, and now they identify as a woman and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
And obviously, that's not something I had a problem with. But up until that point, my sexuality had not expanded to include that definition. So I
Right.
was a little bit taken aback, and I was like, I don't really know what to do in this scenario. I've not really been put in this position before. I don't know how to act, given that I was expecting something that was sort of not really what ended up happening. And so we talked for a while, and I was actually really enjoying it. It was a really nice date. Like, it was probably one of the more pleasant that I've been on. And after, we got to chatting for a little while, I started to realize that, hey, I'm actually quite attracted to this person, and that something about their presentation and the way they act like has enamored me beyond just a year of what their, assigned gender at birth was. And so I just told them straight out. I was like, hey, this has come at a bit of a shock to me. I'm assuming you probably know that, given that you don't advertise any of this sort of thing on your profile, but I still find myself very attracted to you. I'd, love to take this further or see you again or what have you. And we ended up sleeping together the same night, and it was a really positive and pleasant experience. And it was how I essentially found out that I was pansexual and had a lot more spectrum of what I was attracted to than just strictly female by the female standard and biological, and so on and so forth. So yeah, that pretty much changed the course of my life forever, based on just how that one first date went. It was really interesting.
I love that. Like, that story was amazing to me for so many different reasons. The first being that, because there are a lot of people who, once they found out that the person that they were going on a date with presented a different way than what they originally thought or assumed, would end the date just right there, or would not have cared how appropriate or accepting, of behavior they were displaying in that moment. So I want to say, like, just a kudos to you just for being a decent human, because there are a lot of people who just aren't.
It was one of those things where I don't know how I would have reacted had I not been more open to it going any further. Like, if I had actually been faced with that opportunity and determined that, yeah, actually I'm straight and that's just kind of the way that I am. Like, I definitely probably still would have had that same conversation with them, but I don't think it would have been quite as frictionless, because she seemed really open to the fact that, like, hey, I've never done this before, and this is something that I'm now curious about because of this interaction. But I don't know if she would have taken it as well if I'd gone, hey, like, look, no offense to you, and not based on any sort of issues here or like anything that you've done necessarily, but that's just not the way that I swing, and that's just kind of how that is. Like, I don't know if that would have been received quite as well. So I don't know. It's something I think about from time to time. So yeah, it was an interesting experience. Meant a lot to me. I'm happy with how it went. So far so good.
Like you said, we never really know what our favorite flavor is until we try it. Just being honest. And for people who, sorry to get on the soapbox, but like, for people who are too nervous or afraid to date outside of their comfort zone a little bit, I was like, sometimes I feel sorry, because some of the most beautiful relationships that I have personally had too came from me saying, this isn't my normal, and I typically wouldn't go for this, but I am finding myself enjoying this experience, and things blossomed beautifully. It might not have worked out and they might have been my forever partner, but
it was a hell of a time while you were there.
Yeah, 100%. And
I did tons of things just for the story, just because I thought it would be cool to think about later and go like, oh, that was something that I did. That was fun. That was interesting.
The beauty of being the dumpster fire that we are. Okay, we burn bright, and we can't take people can't take their eyes off us.
Oh yeah, all debauchery never hurt.
Well, okay, this has been such a fun little episode for us. We covered a lot of topics, some that are really important, that even though we said them lightly or with a smile on their face, that no, maybe you need to take the time to start with self, step outside your comfort zone a little bit, and really start to think of, what am I bringing to this relationship that I am, no matter what type of relationship, what am I bringing, and why would people want me to be here? Because like I said, if you are feeling like a pretender in your own skin,
you got some work to do.
You got some work to do. But before we get out of here, guys, I want to just open the floor up to you. Do you have any projects coming up? Anything big? Any new articles coming out that we need to look out for?
Yeah, so I've got obviously everything all for free, completely, open to the public at cainparish.com. That's all ready and ready to go. But I'm doing the pre-order right now for my private community, which is a social circle, a place that you can find like-minded people, that you can entertain some of the stuff that we've talked about today, talk with some people that agree with us all. I'm taking in some early bird intake now. So if you want to get that, just go to cainparish.com/the social circle, and I'll see you there. All
right, guys, you heard it here first. Until the next time, I hope all you amazing people continue just to keep striving to be a better version, the most awesome version of you that you can be,